Hi, my name's Vanessa Stoykov and I'm the founder and CEO of Evolution Media Group. In this program, we're bringing leading experts in their field together with decision makers and influencers who are helping to solve some of the wicked problems we face as a global society. Watching this conversation is a live audience of experienced financial advisors who will later join us in the conversation. So let's take a look at our first wicked problem.
Today's wicked problem is, how do more people access good financial advice? Declining advisor numbers combined with high compliance costs has made financial advice unaffordable for the masses. So how can we lower the cost and increase access for people who need help?
Thank you both for coming to solve this wicked problem, because the first one is a big one, financial advice. How do we get financial advice into the hands, hearts and minds of more people? With me today is Steve Davidson, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Midwinter, which is a bravura company, and Sarah Abood, who is the CEO of the Financial Planning Association. You know, two different perspectives here today. Steve, obviously a tech and software business, so you guys are really doing some leading edge stuff around digital advice. And Sarah are coming into a profession to lead the Financial Planning Association after massive Royal Commission, a big fallout, advisors leaving the industry, education standards rising. So you've kind of come into the job at what I would think is the best time, because it's kind of when everyone wants, needs and values financial advisors. But how do we get advice to them? And I'll start there with you. I mean, some of the stats we've been talking about off camera around how many people need advice, how many people are coming to certain ages. Talk to me about the challenge at the moment for advisors in getting more people advice.
Look, it is a wicked problem. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we were speaking earlier about the mismatch between the number of Australians who need and want advice and the number of financial planners and advisors that we have right now to help them. So by 2026, according to the ABS, we're going to have 137,000 Australians every year turning 65. So that's quite a lot of Australians.
That's hitting retirement.
Exactly. So that's not the only trigger for advice, but it's one of them. And you would need 1,100 new advisors, give or take, every year, just to serve the new demand that's coming online every year.
Wow.
Right now, we don't have very many advisors and planners. In fact, the numbers have halved in the last couple of years. So in 2019, we had close to 30,000 advisors. We now have less than 16,000. So things are going in the wrong direction. Demand's going up, supply's going down. Now, we're doing a lot to try to help turn that around. We need more great financial planners in this country, and that's one of the key ways that we can help solve this problem. But we can't do it quickly. And that's because it takes a while to grow a new financial planner. Those education standards are high. You need to have a tertiary degree in your profession. You need to do a professional year. You need to pass an exam. You need to grow in experience and learning. So it's not something that you can just get tomorrow.
Okay. So yes, there's not 1,100 students a year coming through financial planning as a qual?
Not right now. So we'd love to see that grow, because it's a fantastic career. And obviously there's great opportunities for people who are thinking about this career. But right now the numbers are not where we need them to be. Okay.
Well, Steve, Sarah's just said it takes a while to grow a financial planner, growing humans. So let's go to the non-human, the digital. How, you're sitting in Midwinter, how are you looking at how we're going to solve this problem with tech?
Technology can play a big role, but it shouldn't be seen as replacing a profession and what an advisor does, because the human element is really critical at key points in time in people's lives. But tech can help advisors extend their reach and relevance as consumer needs sort of shift. So the advisors have moved from serving around 300 clients per advisor to down to around 100 clients per advisor. So even trying to...
Why is that? How?
The changes in the way the business models have worked following the Royal Commission have led to different service models. Advisors are now pushing up more to higher net worth clients, providing that advice, and they're serving a smaller client base. So
because they need to make a profit, right?
Correct. So the cost to produce advice at the moment is quite intensive, and therefore they need to charge a fee to make money, and that's entirely fair. But doing that actually rules out a whole percentage of the population that actually have an interest or actually are seeking advice. And the consumer's not always seeking just advice as we would define it under the laws of personal advice or general advice. So they just want financial help in many ways. And they also, one of the key reasons they don't see advisors is they don't believe it's for them. And so technology is going to play a really key role in helping more Australians build confidence with their money and how they interact with it, to actually then maybe get some simple pieces of advice that might then ladder them up into a more human, holistic advice relationship over time.
Okay, and Sarah, do you think with what Steve's talking about, expand the reach of advisors, so we've got 16,000 and say we can use tools to expand that reach, who do you think is going to be left holding the bag with advisors as far as, I mean, the banks are kind of out of advice now for the time being. Super funds, are they the natural owners of financial advice outside of this 16,000 person profession? Like, I'd be interested in your view on that.
I'm not sure that there's a natural owner of advice, because financial advisors and planners are professionals, and there is no reason why we wouldn't be evolving the same sorts of firms as exist in, say, the legal profession, the accountancy profession, where advisors are coming together and creating their own firms and their own partnerships. And in fact, that form of advice is probably the fastest growing right now. Advisors are heading out, licensing themselves, becoming self-licensed and running their own firms. So I see that accelerating already, and I think that will continue. I certainly think that there are a number of organisations that need great financial advisors, that need the support in interacting with their clients. But I'm not sure that they would necessarily own the advice, if that makes sense. I see these organisations needing to work very closely with financial advisors.
Okay. And what about, in this part of the show, we're going to be talking to advisors next and hearing their commentary around how they're solving it at the moment. I mean, they're getting more demand than they can fill, but also how they deal with the next generation of kids of clients, because, you know, to your point on tech, everyone's used to everything being run through an app now. So, and financial services has been kind of late to the party, let's just say, on cool tech. Let's face that. I'm hoping we're changing that. How do you think advisors are going to work, Steve, with their clients to get perhaps the extended family onto a digital relationship if they're not coming to see the advisor?
Well, I think in many ways, and it shouldn't always just be tied to sort of age being the definer of technology. I think there's some statistics out there will talk about that some of the fastest growing user groups within Facebook, for example, are older women.
But everyone knows everyone old, it's just Facebook. Like, my kids say that, we're not on that.
Yeah, but many people are comfortable actually dealing with an app on their telephone today, irrespective of how old they are. So we shouldn't assume that we need the tech just for the next generation. I think it's for both. We shouldn't assume, like COVID's been a great example of where people have realised that they don't have to drive across 2 toll roads to go and see their advisor and spend 3 hours commuting. They can actually do it through a medium over Teams or Zoom, which has been a great release of some capacity, both on the advisor's office time, but for their clients to actually get their personal life back.
Yeah, that's true.
And so there's simple things where technology can help that way. But definitely for, you know, if we look at some of the statistics around younger people using Reddit to actually inform sort of decisions, which is a platform that is in another country that is has people talking about what might be good advice or what stocks to follow. That's unregulated, it feels quite dangerous. Or even, you know, the trend through COVID of seeing more younger people as being some of the fastest users of trading platforms of late. So advisors need to start thinking about how that technology actually sits within their business so they can provide those types of services, but they're regulated under personal advice. That's the opportunity of how technology can extend what they do. Rather than seeing it as competition, they should be saying, how does that augment my business model and what I do as a professional to then get more reach and more relevance to a broader set of consumers or customers?
Yeah, okay. Well, that makes sense. And look, I think everyone's been quite grey around the regulation of digital, right? And advice is a grey area. So, Sarah, this quality of advice review, you're the expert in the field on what's happening there, but like how close are we coming to be able to deliver advisors the tools that can then get to the consumers?
Yes, look, that review that you've mentioned is really critically important. So the quality of advice review that's being led by Michelle Levy and a team from Treasury is absolutely critical. And, you know, as you said, I think you can't really separate digital and human advice. Both are required, both need to interact really well with each other. And I think the review has the incredible potential to help fintechs in particular take greater interest and ability to invest in this space. I think to date, many have been concerned that if they are trying to launch a tool that can advise, you know, a client, the regulations in order to do that are quite complex. They're hard to regulate and navigate. And there isn't an equivalent in our industry to getting something like a binding determination from the tax office. So you really do have to almost take a chance and see if what you're doing is okay in the fintech space right now. And I think for many, that's a pretty daunting thing to do.
A lot of money at play.
Yeah.
If it's not okay. So.
Exactly, that's right. You potentially lose your whole business. So by implementing some of the early recommendations that have come out of this review, I think it does offer great potential to give some more confidence to the digital advice providers to build more tools that can do more for consumers. And I think that helps planners a great deal as well, because, you know, in those early stages of a client's journey, you know, you probably just need some really good, simple pieces of advice and to not blow yourself up. And if you do a few simple things right, that's probably okay for the vast majority of Australians. But most of us, as we go through life, we kind of accumulate complexity. You know, it's harder to write an algorithm for 5 stepkids and 3 different families and an estate dispute. That it's going to be a while before we get there. So you not that necessarily everyone goes down that particular complexity path, but we all find that we have more need for advice, I think, as we mature, as we accumulate greater assets. So I think it's definitely part of the journey that someone goes on. And it would be fantastic if we had some of these simple, great tools that can offer people great advice on those simple things that they need to do in the early stages.
Like savings, like setting up for a mortgage, those sort of things?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Spend less than you earn. If you have debt, have
chestnut.
cover for the debt. That's right. You know, understand what your risk profile is and invest in line with that. Try not to blow yourself up with assets that have a really high chance of going to zero. Avoid scams. You know, there are some things like that I think these tools can be really, really helpful in helping people avoid some of those pitfalls early on.
Okay. Steve, I don't know if you were reading the gossip pages that Kim Kardashian got sued because she talked about cryptocurrency without actually telling what she got paid, which was $250,000. So this whole digital, unregulated, you make the point about Reddit, people are already listening to social media and influencers and even Kim Kardashian about crypto, so who'd have thought it? How is this I mean, does it feel like you're being held back in a way with technology because there's so much regulation around this, whereas all these fintechs have gone on and created cool stuff and we're here as an advice industry grappling with all the things that they don't have to?
Yeah, I think it's not really a technology issue at the moment. I think it's confidence for companies to invest in the technology and use it. And so to Sarah's point, the current legislation and regulation has lots of shades of grey in it, and therefore there's a lot of risk associated with making that investment decision. And what if things change? So the quality advice review, I think, is providing a lot more simplicity and clarity around sort of the concept of good advice and focusing on the outcome as opposed to the process. And I think that's going to give more confidence to people that want to be an advice provider to invest in technology to make a difference. So some of those examples of simple advice Sarah's spoken about, superannuation funds today, some are already providing that type of advice. It's scoped or scaled advice. The only difference is they're doing it as intra-fund advice where the members of the fund as a collective are paying for the advice fees. But the technology could be used by advisors to actually provide a new service proposition to perhaps those younger clients you spoke about before.
So someone watching this show who might be a client of an advisor or thinking about getting an advisor, to your point on the cost to serve, does it cost around $5,000 for a client to an advisor to open a file now? Like, is that a real number, do you think? As if you don't bill that client $5,000, you're going to make a loss straight up?
Well, I think you're referring to a KPMG study that was released, done in conjunction with the FSC, and that's an average number. So they were looking at the average across all types of advice that you could receive. So there are many pieces of advice that would cost less than that to provide, and there are some that would cost more. So it does depend on the complexity. It's very hard to say, go to see a financial planner and it will cost you X. You know, if you don't have a highly complex situation, I would expect it to cost a great deal less than that.
Okay. Well, that's good, because people never know the ranges, right?
Exactly.
Is it 10? Is it 7? Is it 2? Is it... I think because we have been an industry that's charged at the back end previously, people got used to it doesn't cost because you get it in the product, which now it doesn't. So if you're an advisor and it's costing, say, $5 on average to open a file, what would you need to invest in tech to, like, would they be spending $5 a client on tech? Like, talk to me about tech investment versus opening a file regulation investment.
Yeah, so I mean, there's great examples in other sectors. So, for example, people seeking a business loan, for example, is now down to examples of 10 minutes of doing that. And so that's taking sort of complicated inputs that an advisor would need to do through a fact-finding process, highly automated, some levels of self-service where the client's actually doing the work, not the
Filling out the stuff, telling you what they've got.
Or the advisor's staff doing that. Elements of the modelling actually being calculated through algorithms around what is the optimal strategy based on the client's objectives or goals.
Okay.
And then producing a recommendation around, here's some thoughts, and then around what the strategy is, and the advisor can then overlay or personalise that. So technology is sort of there, but it's codifying elements of advice that we're in a very, bespoke or cottage industry to some extent, where advisors want to differentiate around their personal skills, which I think is great. But there are elements of actually codifying the advice process to enable more efficiencies that we're seeing in other sectors.
What do you say to that? I mean, that sounds interesting. As far as if I was an advisor, I'd be like, how do I get in on this? I want more efficiencies. I want it to cost less to serve a client.
Yeah, look, I really agree. I think tech offers huge advantages to advisors and the opportunity to reduce the input costs of advice, and that's a big one. A lot of the costs are involved in information gathering. For example, you need to find out a lot about your client in order to deliver advice. That can be very slow and manual right now, and if you can digitise a lot of that, that brings the cost down a lot. And the quality of advice review itself is looking at how do we bring the input costs of advice down, if you like, because that's obviously a really key way to get the price of advice down to the end consumer. The other piece that's really important for our members is the regulatory costs that are involved in delivering a compliant piece of advice. I think tech can certainly help. What will help even more is if we're able to get rid of a lot of the duplication, a lot of the conflicting regulations that currently exist, so that it becomes much simpler to deliver a great compliant piece of advice. And this review is explicitly looking at that element as well, which we're very, very, very happy about. There's some good, very practical proposals that are being made around having more flexibility, for example, about how you deliver the advice. It's almost proverbial in our profession that an advice interaction is an 80-page document that has been manually produced, that is in large part disclosure.
And boring, because I get it.
And not a racy read. Definitely not a racy read.
Yeah.
So as a client, you're sort of looking at that going,
yeah, great.
Can you tell me, can you give me a summary? And of course it fails in its purpose of disclosure if the client's not actually reading it. So there have been a lot of practical proposals that would get rid of that problem to a large extent. And that will help a lot. It will help the fintech providers because it will really clarify what's the job that they need to do to help the advisor deliver the advice. But it will also help planners directly. So I'm really, really pleased about that, very hopeful that we can get that cost of advice down really in a meaningful way. We're actually doing an updated study to the one that you mentioned earlier. And one of the things we are doing is looking at the different types of advice and seeing if, advice around bringing in protection because you've just taken on a large debt, what's that kind of advice like, as opposed to the advice to transition to retirement where the prices are different and so on. So we're hoping to have some more data on that number very soon.
And I think the other point around that is, because that's really interesting, right, and particularly around the affordability and getting the cost of service down, but it's also about accessibility. So, the process today is a client will meet an advisor for the first time and spend 60 or 90 minutes sort of uncovering their goals and objectives, capturing some of the fact-find information or their financial circumstances, but then go away for a couple of weeks and have their paraplanners model that and come back with some strategy recommendations. And some of that could be shown or modelled, in very intuitive digital applications with the client in that first meeting. To give the client more confidence, they can see the value of the advice in real time up front, and remove that sort of black hole between the first meeting with the advisor and getting that 80-page document, which sometimes could be 3 months later.
Yeah, it is wild. And after you've lost the interest in it, you need them to be coming back with something after you've come out of that meeting when you're pumped. Woo, I'm going to achieve all these things. Or what do I hear now? Not in a while.
I mean, it's definitely deflating to the, 8 weeks goes by, 12 weeks goes by, and you still don't have your advice. And you've almost forgotten the conversation that you had initially. So shortening the time frame, like the elapsed time to deliver the advice, that hasn't been spoken about as much, but I do think that's incredibly important. And the review and the digital tools this will enable, I think will have a really meaningful, quick impact on that. And that will leave consumers in so much of a better position in so many ways.
That's it for this first part of the episode. Join us next time when we'll unpack the discussion with our live studio audience of financial advisors. Sarah, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Vanessa.
I'm Vanessa Stoykov. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.